The Federation Council chamber buzzed with the nervous energy of representatives from 47 different species. Zexthara adjusted her translator implant as she watched the humans enter the room. There were only 3 of them, which seemed insufficient for such a momentous occasion. Most species brought delegations numbering in the dozens. The lead human introduced himself as General Marcus Chen. He was smaller than Zexthara had expected, with graying hair and calm eyes that seemed to take in everything without revealing anything. Behind him stood a woman with dark skin and intricate braids, introduced as Admiral Sarah Okafor, and a pale man with calculating eyes named Director James Morrison. The situation on Kepler 442b requires immediate intervention, announced Council Prime Veltar, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. The Vorthan Empire has established orbital blockades around 3 mining colonies. Civilian casualties are mounting. The Vorthans were a proud warrior race, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with chitinous exoskeletons that could deflect most energy weapons. They had conquered 17 systems through brutal efficiency and overwhelming force. Their military doctrine was simple: crush resistance so completely that surrender became the only logical choice. Our preliminary analysis suggests a standard peacekeeping deployment, continued Veltar. The Crystari will provide orbital support, the Nexu will handle ground operations, and the Ethereal Collective will manage civilian evacuations. Estimated timeline: 14 cycles to achieve total compliance. General Chen raised his hand. The gesture was so simple, so ordinary, that it took several moments for the chamber to fall silent. With respect, Council Prime, Chen said, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber despite its quiet tone. My government would like to volunteer our forces for this operation. A ripple of something that might have been amusement passed through the assembled delegates. The humans had been Federation members for such a short time that many species still considered them a curiosity. Their home system contained only one inhabited world, and their technology, while adequate, was hardly revolutionary. That is, appreciated. Veltar replied carefully. But human forces lack the experience necessary for this type of operation. The Vorthans are a formidable opponent. We understand. Admiral Okafor spoke for the first time. Perhaps a demonstration would be appropriate. Zexthara leaned forward in her hovering seat. Something in the Admiral's tone suggested depths that the universal translator couldn't quite convey. What kind of demonstration? Asked Kethmore, the Nexu representative. His people were renowned for their military prowess, having never lost a ground engagement in over 2 centuries. Director Morrison stepped forward and activated a holo projector. The image that appeared showed a barren world scarred by weapon impacts and dotted with the twisted remains of metal structures. This is Hadley's world, Morrison said. 6 months ago, it was home to 30,000 human colonists. The Ravager swarm found it first. The chamber went silent. Everyone knew about the Ravager swarm, a plague of biomechanical entities that consumed everything in their path. They had destroyed 14 civilizations before finally being contained at the Galactic Rim. No one had ever successfully defended against a Ravager assault. The colonists had 48 hours to evacuate, Morrison continued. They chose to stay and fight. The hologram shifted, showing tactical displays that made several delegates gasp. Wave after wave of Ravagers crashed against defensive positions that should have been overrun in minutes. But somehow, impossibly, the human lines held. The colonists included miners, teachers, farmers, children. Chen said quietly. They had hunting rifles and construction equipment. The Ravagers brought warships and bioforms designed to crack fortress worlds. The tactical display showed the humans doing something that defied every known principle of warfare. Instead of forming defensive lines, they scattered into small groups. Instead of concentrating firepower, they spread it across impossible angles. Instead of retreating when overwhelmed, they seemed to multiply. How? Whispered Pexham, the ethereal representative. Her species had studied warfare for millennia, cataloguing every successful strategy ever employed. Humans don't fight armies, Admiral Okafor said. We fight wars. The hologram showed the final hours of the battle. The Ravagers, designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers, found themselves trapped in a web of intersecting kill zones. Human civilians appeared from hiding spots that shouldn't have existed, striking at the biomechanical creatures with weapons improvised from mining equipment and farming tools. The colonists held for 72 hours until Fleet Admiral Chen arrived with the relief force, Morrison continued. Zexthara noticed that the general's expression didn't change when his relation to the fleet admiral was implied. She also noticed that his hands were absolutely steady as he watched the display. When the dust settled, every single Ravager bioform had been destroyed or driven off. The colonists lost 800 people. Chen paused, and for just a moment, something flickered behind his calm expression. They were all volunteers. Every single one stayed to fight because they chose to. The silence in the chamber was profound. The Ravagers were a nightmare that had haunted the galaxy for generations. Entire fleets had been consumed trying to stop even small Ravager incursions. The Vorthans, Chen continued, are certainly dangerous. But they fight like civilized beings. They follow rules. They have strategies that can be predicted, countered, and defeated. He turned to face the Council Prime directly. The Ravagers don't follow rules. They don't retreat. They don't negotiate. They consume everything until nothing remains. His voice remained quiet, but somehow filled the enormous chamber. And humans stopped them with farming equipment and determination. Kefmore shifted uncomfortably in his ceremonial armor. The Nexu have protocols for unconventional warfare. Our specialists train for decades in asymmetric tactics. Admiral Okafor's smile was polite and terrifying. With respect, Commander, you train for unconventional warfare. Humans were born from it. She activated her own holoprojector. The image showed a blue-green world covered in white clouds. This is Earth. For 10,000 years, my species has been perfecting the art of killing each other. We've fought with sticks and stones, with swords and spears, with bullets and bombs, with poison gas and nuclear fire. We've fought in forests and deserts, in cities and farmland, on land and sea, and in the air. The display cycled through images that made several delegates look away. Battlefields stretching to the horizon. Cities reduced to rubble. Massive machines designed for nothing but destruction. We fought over resources, over territory, over ideas, over gods that may not even exist. We fought when outnumbered 1,000 to 1. We fought when victory was impossible. We fought when defeat meant the extinction of everything we held dear. Zexthara found herself leaning back in her chair. The casual way the Admiral described such carnage was deeply unsettling. And we survived, General Chen added. Every single time. No matter how dark things became, humans found a way to keep fighting, because that's what we do. We adapt. We endure, we overcome. The Council Prime's crystalline form shimmered with uncertainty. The Federation operates under strict rules of engagement. Civilian casualties must be minimized. Infrastructure must be preserved. Cultural sites must be protected. Of course, Director Morrison nodded. We're not savages, Council Prime. We understand the importance of civilized warfare. Something about the way he said civilized made Zexthara's skin crawl. However, Morrison continued, the Vorthans have already demonstrated they don't share our respect for civilian life. 3 mining colonies are under siege. Children are dying while we debate protocol. The hologram shifted again, showing intercepted Vorthan communications. The translation made several delegates physically ill. The Vorthans weren't just blockading the colonies, they were systematically destroying anything that might provide hope or comfort to the trapped civilians. How long would your forces require for deployment? Veltar asked reluctantly. Our advance units are already in position, Chen replied. The chamber erupted in shocked, chittering clicks and harmonic tones as delegates expressed their surprise in 47 different ways. Already in position? Kefmore demanded. The Federation hasn't authorized any military deployments to that sector. Admiral Okafor's expression didn't change. Human merchant vessels have been running supply missions to the colonies for the past 2 cycles. Some of those merchant vessels have very flexible cargo manifests. You violated Federation airspace regulations, accused Pexan. We violated nothing, Morrison replied calmly. Check the manifests. Emergency medical supplies, food rations, construction equipment, all perfectly legal. And the weapons. What weapons? Morrison's expression was the picture of innocence. I said construction equipment. Mining charges can be very versatile tools. Zexthara realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. The humans hadn't just planned for this moment. They had been preparing for it from the moment they joined the Federation. While other species had debated and formed committees and established protocols, the humans had simply acted. This is highly irregular, Veltar protested. So is letting children die while we argue about procedure, Chen replied. Give us 48 hours. If we haven't resolved the situation by then, deploy your peacekeeping forces as planned. And if you fail? General Chen's smile was gentle and absolutely terrifying. Council Prime, failure is not a concept that translates well into human languages. We have words that approximate it, but they don't mean quite what you think they mean. The vote was close, 24 in favor, 22 opposed, with 1 abstention. The humans had 48 hours to prove that their mysterious confidence wasn't just arrogance. As the chamber began to empty, Zexthara approached the human delegation. Something about their calm certainty disturbed her deeply. "General Chen," she said, her translator converting her harmonic tones into standard Federation. "May I ask what makes you so confident?" "The Vorthans have never been defeated in direct combat." Chen turned to face her, and for a moment, she saw something in his eyes that made her wish she hadn't asked. "Ambassador, you've studied warfare across the galaxy for centuries. You've seen species fight over territory, resources, political control. You've catalogued their strategies, their weapons, their tactics." He paused, and that terrible gentle smile returned. "But you've never seen a species fight over the right to exist. You've never witnessed what humans become when they're protecting their children." As the human delegation left the chamber, Zexthara realized she was trembling. Not from fear of what the Vorthans might do, but from the growing certainty that the galaxy was about to learn something it was not prepared to understand. The humans were going to war. And despite having seen conflict across 1,000 worlds, she had no idea what that actually meant. She would learn, though. Over the next 48 hours, she would learn exactly what the galaxy had invited into its civilized conflicts. And she would never forget what she saw. Admiral Thexvar of the Vorthan Third Fleet was reviewing casualty reports when his communications officer began clicking frantically at his console. "Admiral, we're receiving an unauthorized transmission on all frequencies." "From the colonies?" Thexvar's mandibles clacked with irritation. The trapped miners had been sending increasingly desperate pleas for the past 7 cycles. Such weakness disgusted him. "No, sir. The transmission origin is unknown." Thexvar's 4 eyes narrowed. His fleet maintained perfect sensor coverage of the entire system. Nothing moved without his knowledge. "Put it through." The main display flickered, showing a human male in what appeared to be civilian clothing. He was seated in what looked like the bridge of a transport vessel, completely relaxed despite the obvious danger of broadcasting to a Vorthan war fleet. "Greetings, Admiral Thexvar. My name is Captain Rodriguez. I represent the human merchant fleet currently in this system." Thexvar's thorax plates bristled. "Human vessel, you are in violation of military blockade protocols. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Rodriguez smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Actually, Admiral, I'm calling to offer you a chance to withdraw your forces peacefully. The Federation Council has assigned this system to human jurisdiction for the next 46 hours and 37 minutes. The bridge fell silent. Thexvar had seen fear, anger, desperation, and pleading from dozens of species. He had never seen such calm confidence from someone who was vastly outnumbered. "Human, you pilot a single merchant vessel against my entire fleet. Do you suffer from some form of mental deficiency?" "Oh, I'm not piloting a merchant vessel." Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. "I'm coordinating them." The Vorthan sensor displays exploded with new contacts. Ships decloaked throughout the system, not warships, but dozens of civilian transports that had somehow positioned themselves in perfect flanking formations around the Vorthan fleet.
"Impressive," Thexvar admitted.
"But merchant vessels pose no threat to military craft. Your weapons are insufficient to penetrate our shields." "You're absolutely right," Rodriguez agreed. "Merchant vessel weapons are completely inadequate for ship-to-ship combat." He paused, still smiling that unsettling smile. "Good thing we're not planning ship-to-ship combat." Every merchant vessel in the system launched simultaneously, but instead of weapons fire, they released clouds of what appeared to be metallic debris. "Chaff?" Dexvar's technical officer sounded confused. "Sir, they're deploying sensor chaff." "No," Rodriguez's voice carried clearly over the comm. "We're deploying mining charges." The metallic clouds began to move, propelled by tiny thruster systems. Thexvar realized with growing horror that each piece of debris was actually a guided munition, invisible to sensors because it contained no energy signatures. "All ships, emergency maneuvering," he ordered. It was too late. The mining charges had been positioned perfectly, their trajectories calculated to intercept the Vorthan ships no matter which direction they moved. And unlike military weapons, mining charges were designed to crack asteroid hulls. They didn't explode in spectacular energy bursts that could be blocked by shields. They simply punched through whatever was in their way. The first Vorthan destroyer died silently as a dozen mining charges tore through its hull like bullets through paper. The second managed to raise emergency power to its shields before discovering that the mining charges weren't targeting the shields at all. They were targeting the shield generators. Within minutes, 6 Vorthan ships were drifting hulks, their crews evacuating in escape pods. Impossible, Dexter breathed. Our tactical computers show no weapon signatures. How are you targeting us? Rodriguez's image leaned forward, and for the first time, his smile looked genuinely amused. Admiral, you're thinking like a military commander. You're watching for weapon signatures, energy buildups, targeting systems. But we're not using weapons. He gestured to something off-screen. Every human child learns basic physics in school. Velocity equals mass times acceleration. Put enough mass moving fast enough in the right direction and you don't need weapons. You need engineering. Another wave of mining charges launched from the merchant fleet, but these were different. They moved in complex patterns, weaving between the Vorthan defensive fire like they were alive. Your point defense systems are very impressive, Rodriguez continued conversationally, as his mining charges systematically destroyed every weapon emplacement on the Vorthan flagship.
They're designed to intercept military ordnance missiles, torpedoes, energy projectiles.
Unfortunately, they can't target something that doesn't look like a weapon. Texfar's bridge shuddered as mining charges tore through the ship's secondary hull. Emergency lights flickered, and the acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air. What do you want? He demanded. I want you to withdraw your forces from this system immediately. The Vorthan Empire does not retreat from inferior opponents. Rodriguez's expression didn't change, but somehow became infinitely more dangerous. Admiral, I'm going to explain something that our species learned a very long time ago. There are no superior or inferior opponents. There are only opponents who understand the situation they're in and opponents who don't. The tactical display showed more human vessels decloaking throughout the system, not just around the Vorthan fleet, but positioned near the mining colonies, around the system's gas giant, even in the outer asteroid belt. You see, while your fleet was establishing its blockade and making demands, we were having conversations with the miners down on those colonies. Turns out they know a lot about explosives, and asteroid mining, and structural engineering. Rodriguez activated a secondary display showing the mining colonies. What Thexvar had assumed were defensive positions were actually massive excavation sites, where industrial equipment was extracting something from deep underground. Thorium, Rodriguez said helpfully. Lots and lots of thorium, refined and shaped and positioned very carefully over the past 2 cycles. Thexvar's tactical officer turned pale green. So, thorium in those quantities could crack the entire moon, yes, Rodriguez finished. Fascinating stuff, thorium, very stable under normal conditions. But if you heat it to exactly the right temperature and compress it with precisely the right amount of force, he didn't need to finish the threat. Everyone on the bridge understood nuclear physics. You're bluffing, Thexvar said, but his voice lacked conviction. You would kill everyone on those colonies. Would I? Rodriguez leaned back again. Tell me, Admiral, how many human civilians do you see on those colonies? Thexvar checked his sensors. The life signs on the planets showed thousands of heat signatures, but now that he looked closely, they were all wrong. Too regular, too evenly spaced. Decoys, he realized. You evacuated them. We evacuated everyone 3 cycles ago. Every human, every Federation citizen, every neutral trader. The only people left on those worlds are volunteers. What kind of volunteers? Rodriguez's smile became genuinely terrifying. The kind who spent their careers defusing unexploded ordnance in active war zones. The kind who volunteered for suicide missions because someone had to hold the line. The kind who look at a thorium bomb and think, I wonder how big an explosion I can make. The display shifted to show individual figures moving through the mining installations. They weren't running or hiding, they were calmly working at control stations, making final adjustments to devices that Thexvar now realized weren't mining equipment at all. They're combat engineers, Rodriguez continued, explosive experts who spent decades learning how to blow things up efficiently. And right now, they're very carefully preparing to turn 3 entire moons into the largest improvised weapons in galactic history. Thexvar's communications officer spoke up nervously. Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from our escort vessels. What? The merchant ships have surrounded each of our vessels individually. They're not demanding surrender, sir. They're requesting it, very politely. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. Captain Martinez has excellent manners. Former Marine, very professional. Captain Singh prefers a more direct approach. She used to run blockades during the corporate wars. Captain O'Brien just likes blowing things up, but he's surprisingly articulate when he wants to be. Thexvar realized that every single ship in his fleet was now surrounded by human merchant vessels, each one broadcasting polite but firm surrender requests. His mighty war fleet had been neatly dissected by civilians with mining equipment and good manners. This is impossible, he muttered. You're not soldiers. You're merchants, miners, civilians. Yes, Rodriguez agreed. We're also humans. He stood up, and for the first time, Thexvar noticed the scars on the human's hands and arms. Old scars from weapons that had drawn blood decades ago. Admiral, every human in this system volunteered to be here. The merchants volunteered to risk their ships, the miners volunteered to stay behind and arm nuclear devices. The engineers volunteered to pilot vessels loaded with explosives into your fleet if necessary. Rodriguez paused, letting that sink in. We didn't volunteer because we're soldiers. We volunteered because someone asked for help, and helping people is what humans do. Even when it's stupid. Even when it's dangerous. Even when it's probably going to get us all killed. Thexvar looked at his tactical displays. His fleet was crippled, surrounded, and facing opponents who had turned an entire star system into a weapon. But more than that, he was facing something he had never encountered before. You're all insane, he said quietly. Probably, Rodriguez admitted cheerfully. But we're very good at being insane in organized, effective ways. The Vorthan Admiral made the hardest decision of his military career. He opened a fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, begin withdrawal to the outer system. Prepare for jump to hyperspace. Rodriguez nodded respectfully. Thank you, Admiral. Your escape pods will be recovered and your wounded will receive medical attention. Safe travels. As the Vorthan fleet limped toward the system's edge, Thexvar couldn't stop thinking about the humans' casual mention of volunteers, an entire species that would risk everything for strangers, not because they were ordered to, but because someone needed help. It was the most terrifying concept he had ever encountered. Back in Federation space, Ambassador Zex Thahara watched the tactical reports with growing unease. The humans had defeated a Vorthan fleet without firing a single military weapon. They had turned merchant vessels into warships, civilians into soldiers, and an entire star system into a trap. But what disturbed her most was the realization that this wasn't human military doctrine at its finest. According to the reports, this was just humans being helpful. She began to understand why General Chen had been so confident. The galaxy had been measuring human military capability by the wrong standards. They had been looking for armies, fleets, weapons, and strategies. They should have been looking for volunteers. The Vorthan Empire's response was swift and brutal. Emperor Krexdor himself authorized the deployment of the 5th Conquest Fleet 200 warships carrying the most elite warriors in Vorthan space. Their target, the human homeworld of Earth. If humans wish to play at war, the Emperor declared in his broadcast to the galaxy, they will learn what true warfare means. Ambassador Zexthara requested emergency passage to Earth. She told herself it was for diplomatic reasons, to observe Federation interests during the crisis. In truth, she was terrified of what she might witness. The humans at Kepler 442b had been merchants and miners. Earth held 4 billion human civilians and whatever military forces humanity had kept hidden. The journey took 6 cycles. When her diplomatic vessel dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, Zexthara immediately understood that everything the galaxy thought it knew about human military capacity was wrong. The system was full of ships. Not hundreds of ships, like a normal defense fleet. Not thousands of ships, like the massive armadas that great powers maintained for system defense. There were tens of thousands of vessels throughout Sol space, from massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in the Federation Navy to small fighters that seemed barely large enough for a single pilot. This is impossible, breathed Captain Kells, her Altarian pilot. Our intelligence report showed Earth maintaining fewer than 50 military vessels. Request permission to approach Earth. Zexthara ordered, though her voice trembled slightly. The reply came immediately, in perfect Federation standard, with a slight accent that a translator identified as originating from Earth's North American continent. Permission granted. Ambassador, please maintain your current heading and prepare to receive an escort. 6 human fighters appeared alongside her vessel so smoothly that her pilot gasped in surprise. They hadn't detected any movement on sensors. The small craft had simply materialized from apparent empty space. "Welcome to Sol System, Ambassador Zexthara," came a calm female voice. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, Earth Defense Force. We'll guide you to a safe observation position." "Safe from what?" Zexthara asked. There was a pause before the reply. "From us, Ambassador. The Vorthan fleet will arrive in approximately 4 hours. Things are going to get interesting." As they flew deeper into the system, Zexthara began to understand the scale of human preparation. What she had initially taken for a massive fleet was actually something far more disturbing. Every asteroid, every satellite, every piece of orbital infrastructure had been modified. Solar collectors had become focusing arrays for energy weapons. Mining stations had become missile platforms. Even the space elevators connecting Earth to its orbital stations had been converted into massive railguns. "How long did this take to prepare?" she asked. "About 36 hours, Lieutenant Commander Park replied casually. 36 hours? That's impossible. Ambassador, humans have been planning for this scenario since we first learned we weren't alone in the universe. We've spent 3 centuries asking ourselves one question. What would we do if someone tried to destroy our home? The escort fighters guided her to a station positioned near Mars' orbit, far enough from Earth to be safe, but close enough to observe the coming battle. As her ship docked, Zexthara noticed that the station's crew was a mix of civilians and military personnel, all working with the calm efficiency of people who had trained for this moment their entire lives. She was met by a human male in a dark blue uniform that she didn't recognize. He was older than General Chen, with silver hair and the kind of scars that spoke of old battles. "Admiral Rodriguez," he introduced himself. "Welcome to Fort Apache Station. You'll be safe here during the festivities." "Admiral Rodriguez? Are you related to Captain Rodriguez from Kepler 442b? The Admiral's smile was warm and proud. "My nephew. Good boy, very creative with mining charges." Zexthara realized she was meeting human military leadership that had been completely unknown to Federation intelligence. "Admiral, our reports indicated that Earth's defense fleet numbered fewer than 50 vessels. How do you explain—" She gestured toward the viewports where thousands of ships could be seen moving in perfect formation. "Oh, those reports were accurate," Rodriguez nodded. "We have 47 official military vessels. The rest are volunteers." "Volunteers? Merchant marines, corporate security, police forces, search and rescue, scientific research vessels, mining ships, transport companies, recreational craft owners, and quite a few people who just built their own ships because they thought it would be fun." Admiral Rodriguez led her to the station's observation deck, where a holographic display showed the entire Sol system in tactical detail. The scope of human preparation was staggering. "Every human who could pilot a spacecraft volunteered for system defense," he continued. "We had to turn people away. Our biggest problem wasn't finding enough pilots. It was finding enough ships for all the volunteers. This level of coordination would take years to organize," Zexthara protested. "Ambassador, humans have been organizing for war since we invented language. Every city, every region, every nation on Earth has detailed emergency plans. When the call went out, everyone knew exactly what to do." The holographic display shifted to show Earth itself. The blue-green world was surrounded by defensive platforms, but Zexthara could also see massive construction projects on the planet's surface. "What are those?" She pointed to what appeared to be enormous installations covering entire continents. Admiral Rodriguez's expression became serious. "Those are the reason we asked you to observe from a safe distance. Earth's surface has been temporarily evacuated." Evacuated 4 billion people? Relocated to underground facilities, orbital stations, lunar bases, and the outer colonies. It took 30 hours, but every civilian is now in hardened shelters. Zexthara felt a chill run down her spine. "You're planning to fight on the planet's surface?" "Ambassador, we're not planning to fight on Earth's surface. We're planning to use Earth itself as a weapon." Before she could ask what that meant, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The main display lit up with new contacts at the edge of the system. "Vorthan 5th Conquest Fleet has arrived," announced a calm voice over the station's communication system. "All units, this is Fleet Admiral Chen. You know the drill. Make us proud." Zexthara realized she was looking at the same Admiral Chen who had led the relief force to Hadley's world, the one General Chen had mentioned with such careful respect. The Vorthan fleet was magnificent and terrible. 200 of the most advanced warships ever constructed, each one capable of cracking a planet's crust. They moved in perfect formation toward Earth, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had no idea what they were flying into. The first human attack didn't come from the massive fleet of defending vessels. It came from the asteroid belt. Thousands of asteroids suddenly changed course, propelled by hidden engines toward the Vorthan formation. But these weren't random chunks of rock. They were precisely guided projectiles, each one targeting a specific enemy vessel. Kinetic bombardment, Admiral Rodriguez explained as they watched the tactical display. Asteroids don't show up as weapons on sensors because they're not weapons. They're just very large, very fast rocks. The Vorthan fleet responded with overwhelming firepower, shattering the incoming asteroids with energy weapons that could melt mountains. But the fragments continued forward, thousands of smaller pieces still moving at incredible velocity. Physics is funny, Rodriguez continued conversationally. Blow up a projectile moving at significant fractional light speed, and you don't get smaller pieces moving slower. You get smaller pieces moving at the same speed, but spread over a wider area. The Vorthan fleet found itself flying through a storm of debris that their shields couldn't fully deflect. Dozens of ships suffered damage as asteroid fragments punctured their hulls. But that was just the opening move. The human fleet attacked from 6 directions simultaneously. But instead of the chaotic melee that most species employed, the human vessels moved like parts of a single organism. Fighters provided cover for bombers, which cleared paths for heavy cruisers, which protected supply ships that seemed to appear from nowhere with fresh ammunition and replacement parts. "This is impossible," Zextara breathed. "No fleet can coordinate this precisely without massive communication systems. The Vorthans should be jamming your signals." "They are," Rodriguez agreed. "We're not using electronic communication." "Then how are you coordinating?" The Admiral pointed to the tactical display, where human ships were maneuvering in patterns that seemed almost choreographed. "Ambassador, humans have been fighting together for thousands of years. We've learned to read each other's intentions, to anticipate what our allies will do before they do it. When Captain Martinez moves his squadron to the left, Commander Singh doesn't need a radio signal to know she should cover his flank. She just knows." Zextara watched in fascination as human vessels executed maneuvers that required split-second timing and perfect trust. Ships passed within meters of each other, pilots threading their craft through gaps that seemed too small to exist, all without any apparent communication. "It's like they're dancing," she murmured. "In a way, they are. This is how humans fight when we're serious about winning." Oh, hundreds. The Vorthan fleet, despite its technological superiority, was being systematically dismantled. Every time they focused fire on one group of human ships, another group would appear from an unexpected angle. Every time they tried to establish a defensive formation, human vessels would slip through gaps that shouldn't have existed. But the most disturbing part wasn't the tactical brilliance or the seamless coordination. It was the fact that the humans were clearly holding back. "Admiral," Zextara said slowly, "how much of Earth's military capacity am I actually seeing?" Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "About 15%, he said finally. "The rest is still in reserve, in case the Vorthans have reinforcements coming." 15%? "Ambassador, every human on Earth volunteered for system defense. Every human in the colonies volunteered for system defense. Every human in Federation space volunteered for system defense. We had to establish a lottery system just to decide who got to participate." On the tactical display, the Vorthan formation was collapsing. Their mighty fleet, which had conquered 17 systems, was being defeated by what appeared to be a collection of merchant vessels and civilian volunteers. But Admiral Rodriguez wasn't smiling. "The real test comes now," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" "The Vorthans are about to realize they can't win this fight. That's when they'll try to take Earth's civilian population hostage." As if summoned by his words, the Vorthan fleet suddenly changed course. Instead of continuing their retreat, they aimed directly for Earth itself. "All civilian targets," Admiral Rodriguez announced over the fleet communications. They're going for the planet. What happened next would haunt Zextara for the rest of her life. Every human ship in the system moved to intercept the Vorthan fleet. Not tactically, not strategically, but with the simple, absolute determination of parents protecting their children. Ships that had been damaged beyond repair continued fighting. Pilots whose vessels had lost life support stayed at their posts. Crews whose weapons were exhausted rammed their ships directly into Vorthan hulls. And through it all, she could hear the human communications, calm, professional voices coordinating the defense of their home. This is Captain Morrison. My engines are gone, but I still have missiles. Copy that, Morrison. Chen Squadron will cover your approach. Rodriguez Wing, we've got wounded who need evacuation. On our way, Sarah. Hold position. Medical is en route. They weren't just fighting a battle. They were protecting their family. And that, Zexthara realized, was what made humans so terrifying. Not their technology, not their tactics, not their coordination. It was the fact that they fought like they had something worth dying for. The Vorthan breakthrough toward Earth lasted exactly 43 minutes. Zexthara watched from Fort Apache Station as the human response escalated beyond anything she had thought possible. What had begun as a coordinated defense became something else entirely, something that made her understand why General Chen had spoken so quietly about human warfare. The Vorthans managed to punch through the outer defensive perimeter by concentrating their entire fleet into a single spearhead formation. 57 human ships died stopping them, but 12 Vorthan heavy cruisers broke through anyway, racing toward Earth's atmosphere with weapons charged and targeting systems locked on major population centers. That's when Earth itself came alive. The massive installations Zexthara had noticed earlier revealed their true purpose. They were planetary defense cannons, each one the size of a city, built into the planet's crust and drawing power from the molten core itself. When they fired, the energy discharges were visible from Mars orbit, but the cannons weren't aimed at the incoming Vorthan ships. They were aimed at space itself, filling the orbital approaches to Earth with coherent energy beams that turned the vacuum into a maze of destruction. The Vorthans found themselves flying through a three-dimensional grid of death, their shields overloading as they tried to navigate between beams that could slice through a mountain. How is this possible? Zexthara asked. The power requirements alone. Admiral Rodriguez's expression was grim. We've spent 3 centuries preparing for this day. Every city on Earth has geothermal plants connected to the planetary defense grid. Every fusion reactor, every solar collector, every power source on the planet is now feeding those cannons. You're using Earth's entire power grid as a weapon? We're using everything as a weapon. On the tactical display, the Vorthan breakthrough force was being systematically destroyed. But Zexthara noticed something disturbing. Several human ships were moving to physically intercept Vorthan's vessels that were still moving toward Earth, even though their own shields were down and their weapons were exhausted. Those ships are going to be destroyed, she said. Yes, Rodriguez replied quietly. They know. She watched in horror as a human destroyer, its hull breached and atmosphere venting, accelerated directly into the path of a Vorthan heavy cruiser. The collision was brief and absolutely final. Both ships disappeared in a flash of nuclear fire. This is madness, she whispered. No, Rodriguez said. This is what humans become when someone threatens our home. The communications channel crackled with the transmission from the dying destroyer's captain. Tell my kids I love them. Rodriguez Wing, you're clear for your attack run. More human ships were following the destroyer's example. Vessels too damaged to fight effectively were ramming Vorthan ships, their crews calmly broadcasting final messages to their families before impact. But the most disturbing thing wasn't the sacrifices themselves. It was how organized they were. Captain Martinez, your ship is too damaged to continue. Return to base for repairs. Negative, Admiral. I've got one more ramming speed left in her. Copy that, Martinez. Make it count. Sarah's squadron will follow up your attack. They were discussing suicide attacks with the same professional calm they might use to coordinate supply runs. Admiral, Zexthara said, her voice shaking, your people are dying. Yes. Rodriguez nodded. That's what happens in war. People die. The question is whether they die for something worth dying for. The surviving Vorthan ships, realizing they couldn't break through to Earth's surface, changed tactics. Instead of trying to reach the planet, they began targeting human civilian installations, orbital habitats, research stations, anything that might contain non-combatants. The human response was immediate and absolute. Every human ship in the system converged on the Vorthans. Not just military vessels, but merchant ships, mining craft, scientific research vessels, even private yachts. Anything with engines and life support was now part of the defense fleet. This is insane, Zexthara repeated. You're sending civilians against military warships?
Ambassador, Rodriguez said, his voice carrying a note of steel she hadn't heard before. There are no civilians in this fight.
There are only humans, and they're all volunteers. She watched a luxury yacht, probably belonging to some wealthy human businessman, accelerate toward a Vorthan battleship. Its weapons were no match for military armor, but it carried something more dangerous than weapons. It carried a human who had decided that some things were worth dying for. The yacht exploded against the Vorthan shields, its death barely registering on the tactical display, but its sacrifice allowed 3 human fighters to get close enough to target the battleship's weapon systems. And then Zexthara witnessed something that would change her understanding of warfare forever. The human fighters didn't just attack the Vorthan ship. They coordinated with a dozen other small craft to execute a maneuver that required perfect timing, absolute trust, and the kind of split-second decision-making that most species needed computers to achieve. While one fighter drew the battleship's defensive fire, another slipped under its shield grid. While the second fighter engaged the ship's point defense systems, the third penetrated the hull and detonated its entire payload inside the enemy vessel. All 3 human pilots died in the attack. All 3 of them knew they were going to die when they started it, and all 3 of them executed their roles with the precision of professionals who had trained together for years. "How many of your people are willing to die like this?" Zexthara asked. Admiral Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, watching as more human ships threw themselves against the remaining Vorthan forces. "All of them," he said finally. "Every single human in this system volunteered knowing they might not survive. Not because we want to die, but because we want our children to live." The tactical display showed the battle's conclusion. The last Vorthan ship, overwhelmed by human attackers who seemed to multiply every time one was destroyed, finally succumbed to concentrated fire. The mighty 5th Conquest Fleet had been completely destroyed. But the victory celebrations that Zexthara expected never came. Instead, the human communications channels filled with damage reports, casualty counts, and rescue coordination. "Search and rescue teams to Grid 7-7 Alpha. We have life pods in the debris field. Medical ships to Fort Apache Station. We have wounded incoming. All vessels with spare capacity begin recovery operations. No one gets left behind." They were already shifting from combat to rescue, even though several of the life pods they were risking themselves to recover contained Vorthan survivors. "Admiral," Zexthara said slowly, "you're rescuing the enemy." "They're defeated," Rodriguez replied. "That makes them wounded people who need medical attention, not enemies." She realized she was witnessing another aspect of human warfare that no other species had understood. Humans didn't just fight with absolute determination, they also knew when to stop fighting. "The Vorthan Empire will send more fleets," she warned. "No," Rodriguez shook his head. "They won't. How can you be certain?" Admiral Rodriguez activated a communication channel she hadn't known was active. The display showed a massive Vorthan war chamber, where Emperor Krexter himself sat on his ceremonial throne, surrounded by his military advisors. The Emperor looked directly at the camera with his 4 eyes, his mandibles clicking slowly in what Zexthara recognized as deep thought.
"Admiral Rodriguez," the Emperor said in heavily accented Federation standard, "I wish to discuss terms."
"Of course, Your Imperial Majesty. What terms did you have in mind?" "Complete withdrawal from all disputed territories. Reparations for damages to Federation colonies. Formal apology for unprovoked aggression against civilian targets." Rodriguez nodded respectfully. "Those terms are acceptable. We'll also return your surviving personnel and provide medical care for your wounded. That is generous of you. Your people fought bravely, Your Majesty. They deserve to be treated with honor." Zexthara stared at the display. The Vorthan Empire, which had never retreated from any battle, was offering complete surrender, not because their fleet had been defeated. Great powers had lost fleets before, but because they had witnessed something that fundamentally changed their understanding of what warfare could become. They had seen an entire species willing to die for their ideals. After the communication ended, Admiral Rodriguez turned to Zexthara. "Ambassador, I need you to understand something. What you witnessed here today wasn't human military doctrine. This wasn't our army, or our navy, or our special forces." He gestured toward the viewport, where thousands of human ships were conducting rescue operations throughout the system. This was 4 billion humans who decided they had something worth protecting. Every single person who participated was a volunteer. Every single sacrifice was made by choice. Every single act of heroism came from someone who decided that their principles mattered more than their safety. Zexthara felt something close to terror as the full implications hit her. "This wasn't even your military." "Oh, we have a military," Rodriguez smiled. "They're currently stationed in the outer colonies, in case the Vorthans had reinforcements coming. What you saw here today was just humans being humans." She realized that everything the galaxy thought it understood about human warfare was wrong. They hadn't witnessed humanity's military might. They had witnessed humanity's civilian population deciding they had something worth dying for. "Admiral, how many humans would fight like this?" "All of them," he replied without hesitation. "Every human, everywhere. If you threaten what we protect, if you attack what we love, if you try to destroy what we've built, all of them." As her diplomatic vessel prepared to depart Sol System, Zexthara found herself thinking about the implications. The galaxy contained dozens of major powers, hundreds of significant civilizations, thousands of species with their own territorial ambitions. And now they all knew that there was a species where every single individual was willing to die for their collective ideals. The balance of power hadn't just shifted, it had been completely redefined. But what disturbed her most wasn't the military implications. It was the realization that humans had fought with such determination not because they loved war, but because they loved peace. They had been willing to die not because they wanted to destroy their enemies, but because they wanted to protect their families. That combination, absolute lethality in service of absolute compassion, was something the galaxy had never encountered before. And now that it had been revealed, nothing would ever be the same. 6 cycles after the Battle of Sol, Ambassador Zexthara stood before the largest gathering of galactic representatives in Federation history. Every major power had sent delegations, along with hundreds of minor civilizations who had never before participated in galactic politics. They had all come to discuss the same question. What do we do about the humans? Aftermath of the Vorthan War had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Within days of Emperor Cruxtor's surrender, 3 other aggressive civilizations had voluntarily withdrawn from disputed territories. The hegemony of Steel had abandoned their expansion into the Outer Rim. The collective of pure thought had ceased their forced assimilation campaigns. The Swarm Queens had recalled their breeding fleets from neutral space. None of them had been threatened by human forces. None of them had even been contacted by human diplomats. They had simply observed what humans were capable of when motivated, and decided that whatever they were fighting for wasn't worth finding out what 4 billion human volunteers could accomplish.
The motion before us today, announced Council Prime Veltar, is whether humanity should be classified as a restricted species under the Dangerous Civilizations Act. Zexthara felt her harmonic tones fluctuate with distress.
The Dangerous Civilizations Act had been created for species like the extinct destroyer cult civilizations, so inherently aggressive that contact with them inevitably led to galactic war.
To classify humans under the same category seemed both insulting and terrifying. The floor recognizes Ambassador Kreldon of the Hegemony of Steel.
Kreldon rose on his mechanical appendages, his voice carrying the cold precision of his cybernetic vocal processors.
Honored representatives, I speak for a civilization that has conquered 400 systems through military superiority. We understand warfare. We respect strength. But what we witnessed at Sol System was not warfare as any rational species understands it. The chamber fell silent as holographic displays showed footage from the battle. Human ships throwing themselves against vastly superior opponents, civilian volunteers coordinating attacks with professional precision, an entire planet weaponized in defense of ideals rather than territory. The humans did not fight for resources, or land, or political control. They fought for the right to continue existing as themselves. And they were all prepared to die for that right. Kreldon's mechanical form shifted slightly, a sign of discomfort among his species. My civilization has faced species that were stronger than us, more technologically advanced than us, more numerous than us. We have always found ways to overcome such advantages through superior strategy or better technology.
He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a note that Zexthara had never heard from a hegemony representative before. Uncertainty.
But we have never faced a species where every individual is a potential martyr.
Where every civilian is a volunteer soldier. Where an entire civilization would rather die than surrender their principles. The humans won, pointed out Ambassador Thexvar, the former Vorthan admiral, who now served as his empire's representative. His survival had been considered a disgrace until he provided detailed intelligence about human capabilities.
They are to be congratulated, not feared. Did they win? Asked Pexan of the Ethereal Collective. Or did they simply demonstrate that the concept of winning and losing doesn't apply to them the way it applies to the rest of us? She activated her own holographic display showing tactical analysis of the Battle of Sol.
Standard military doctrine assumes that casualties will eventually reach a point where continued resistance becomes impossible. At some percentage of losses, any rational civilization will seek terms rather than face complete extinction.
The display showed comparative casualty rates for dozens of historical conflicts, all following predictable patterns of escalation and surrender. Humans sustained 43% casualties during the defense of Sol's system. 43%. Any other species would have surrendered after losing 15% of their forces. Peksan's ethereal form flickered with agitation. But human casualties didn't decrease their effectiveness. If anything, they seemed to fight more desperately as their losses mounted. According to intercepted communications, surviving human units were requesting permission to take more dangerous assignments to avenge their fallen comrades. "That is not rational behavior," stated Kefmore of the Nexu Confederation. "Military doctrine requires that forces retreat when losses become unsustainable. Unless," said a quiet voice from the back of the chamber, "you're fighting for something more important than survival." The assembly turned to see General Marcus Chen entering the chamber, flanked by Admiral Sarah Okafor and Director James Morrison. They had been invited to address the assembly, though many representatives had argued against allowing humans to participate in discussions about humanity's threat level. General Chen, Council Prime Veltar, said carefully, "You are welcome to address the assembly, but I must remind you that this body is discussing concerns about your species' approach to warfare." "I understand," Chen nodded respectfully, "and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify some misunderstandings." He moved to the center of the chamber, and Zexthara noticed that his calm presence seemed to make the massive space feel smaller somehow. "Honored representatives, I've listened to your concerns about human military behavior. You're worried that we fight too hard, sacrifice too much, take too many risks. You're concerned that we don't understand when to surrender." Chen paused, his gaze moving across the assembled delegates. "You're absolutely right." The chamber buzzed with surprised conversations in dozens of languages. "We don't fight the way you do. We don't calculate acceptable loss ratios or strategic withdrawal points. We don't surrender when facing overwhelming odds. And yes, that makes us dangerous." Admiral Okafor stepped forward. "But dangerous to whom?" "In the past 6 cycles since joining the Federation, humans have participated in 17 peacekeeping missions, 12 humanitarian aid operations, and 43 diplomatic mediations. We've never initiated aggressive action against another Federation member." "The Vorthans weren't Federation members," pointed out Ambassador Kreldon. "No," Director Morrison agreed. "They were threatening Federation civilians. Children were dying while this body debated proper procedures. The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Humans volunteered to help because people needed help," Morrison continued. "Not Federation humans, not human allies, not human interests. Just people. And when the Vorthans escalated to threatening our home, we defended it. With suicidal determination," accused Peksan. "Yes," Chen said simply. "When someone threatens to destroy everything we love, we respond with everything we have. Every human, every ship, every weapon, every idea, every last breath if necessary. That level of commitment is unprecedented," Thelter observed. "Most species fight until the cost exceeds the potential benefit. Humans appear to fight until what?" Chen's expression became distant for a moment, as if you were remembering something from long ago. "Until there's nothing left to protect, or no one left to threaten it." The silence that followed was profound and deeply uncomfortable. "But here's what you're missing," Admiral Okafor said, breaking the tension. "Humans don't want to fight. We volunteered for the Kepler operation because it was the right thing to do. We defended Earth because it was our home. But our preferred response to most problems is to talk them out, work them out, or figure out some solution that doesn't involve anyone dying." She activated a holographic display showing human activities across Federation space since joining. "Look at what humans actually spend our time doing. Medical aid to plague-stricken worlds, engineering assistance for failing infrastructure, educational programs for developing civilizations, disaster relief, scientific research, cultural exchange." The display showed hundreds of human operations, the vast majority focused on helping rather than fighting. "We're teachers and doctors and engineers and farmers. We build things, we heal people, we solve problems. We only become soldiers when someone forces us to. But when you do become soldiers," Kreldon's mechanical voice trailed off. "When we become soldiers, we win," Chen finished. "Quickly, decisively, and completely. Because the faster we end conflicts, the sooner we can go back to building schools and hospitals and farms." Zexthara found herself speaking before she realized she intended to. "General, what happens if humanity ever faces an enemy that cannot be negotiated with? cannot be deterred, and will not surrender. Chen turned to look at her directly, and she saw something in his eyes that made her wish she hadn't asked. Ambassador, we've already faced enemies like that. We call them extinct. The chamber erupted in alarmed chattering and clicking and harmonic fluctuations. Chen raised his hand for silence. Earth's history includes several species that attacked humans with the intention of complete extermination. They couldn't be reasoned with, they wouldn't accept surrender, and they showed no mercy to civilians. His voice remained calm and professional, but somehow carried the weight of eons. We remember them in our museums now. We study their biology, their culture, their art, their languages. We preserve their memory and honor their achievements, but they no longer exist as living species because they chose to make extinction the only alternative to victory. You're talking about genocide, whispered Peksan. No, Morrison said firmly. We're talking about survival. There's a difference between exterminating a species because you want their resources and exterminating a species because it's trying to exterminate you. How do we know you'll make that distinction? Demanded Krelden. Admiral Okafor's smile was genuinely warm. Because we've had the capability to exterminate every species in this room for the past 3 centuries, and instead we applied for Federation membership and volunteered to help with your problems. She gestured toward the viewport, where Earth was visible as a small blue dot. We could have built weapons that could crack worlds, ships that could destroy fleets, armies that could conquer systems. Instead, we built hospitals and schools and farms. We chose to heal rather than harm, to build rather than destroy. Until someone threatened what you built, observed Thexvar. Exactly, Chen nodded. We will sacrifice anything to protect what we've built. Our ships, our lives, our entire civilization if necessary. But we'll also sacrifice anything to avoid having to make that choice. Council Prime Veltar's crystalline form shimmered with deep thought. What assurances can you offer that humanity will continue to choose peaceful solutions? None, Chen replied honestly. We can't promise that we'll always choose peace because we can't control what other species do. If someone attacks our children, we will respond with everything we have. If someone threatens our allies, we will stand with them. If someone tries to destroy what we've built, we will stop them. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces representing dozens of species and thousands of worlds. But we can promise this: as long as the galaxy treats humans and human interests with the same respect we show others, we will remain.
Your teachers and doctors and engineers and farmers.
We will build schools and hospitals and farms. We will heal and help and create. And if the galaxy doesn't? Asked Ambassador Kraldan. General Chen's smile was gentle and absolutely terrifying. Then the galaxy will learn what 4 billion volunteers can accomplish when they have nothing left to lose. The vote was unanimous. The motion to classify humans as a restricted species was withdrawn, and humanity was instead granted full membership in the Federation Security Council. Not because the galaxy trusted humans, but because they finally understood what Zexthara had realized during the Battle of Sol. It was much safer to have humans as friends than as enemies. In the cycles that followed, galactic warfare changed fundamentally. Conflicts that had raged for decades ended in negotiated settlements. Aggressive species found diplomatic solutions to their territorial disputes. The threat of having to explain their actions to human volunteers proved to be a more effective deterrent than any weapon ever created. And across the galaxy, on worlds and stations and ships throughout Federation space, human teachers and doctors and engineers continued their quiet work of building something worth protecting. The galaxy had learned that humans were dangerous. It had also learned that humans were worth having as friends. But most importantly, it had learned that some things, freedom, compassion, the right to choose your own path, were worth any sacrifice to preserve. The humans had taught the galaxy that lesson, and the galaxy would never forget it.